Hello, I'm Dr. Amanda Moreira Leite, PhD in Paleoecology and Biostratigraphy from the University of Brasília in Brazil, and I will present about the Ostracota from the Quiricó Formation, Lower Cretaceous, São Francisco Basin, Brazil, state-of-the-art of research. The research regarding the Quiricó Formation, Lower Cretaceous, São Francisco Basin, Minas Gerais State, Brazil, began with the goal of contributing to the expanding knowledge about the biodiversity, paleoecology, paleozoogeography, and chronostratigraphy of Gondwana ostracods. With that, contribute to the expansion of knowledge about stratigraphy, paleoenvironment, and paleogeography of the continental Cretaceous of Gondwana. The São Francisco Basin is an intracratonic basin composed by Proterozoic sedimentary rocks overlapped by Phanerozoic sedimentary rocks. The Phanerozoic sequence is represented from base to top by groups Santa Permian Carboniferous, Areado, Lower Cretaceous, and Mata da Corda, and Urucuia, Upper Cretaceous. In this figure, we can observe the geochronology and lithostratigraphy of the São Francisco Basin before my contributions. The Areado group presents a broad stratigraphic variation and ample lateral variation of lithofacies, product of the simultaneous action of several depositional environments. From base to top, three formations with partially coeval deposition compose the Areado group. They are Abaeté, Quiricó, and Três Barras. The Quiricó Formation, which is our main formation, was deposited in a lacustrine system composed of siltstones, fine, medium, and coarse sandstones, and shales and micritic limestones. The ostracode taxonomy study presented by Leite and collaborators in 2018 was the first study of this size addressing the Quiricó Formation. 16 species of ostracodes were recovered, identified, and described. 3 sections were studied in detail from a sedimentary, lithological, and fossilivorous point of view. The Quiricó Formation is the only formation of the Lower Cretaceous from the São Francisco Basin with the occurrence of ostracodes so far, and biostratigraphy is the main tool to date this formation, and therefore present the stratigraphic range of the Areado group. The major part of taxonomy was presented in the article entitled Taxonomy of Limnic Ostracoda Crustacea from the Quiricó Formation, Lower Cretaceous, São Francisco Basin, Minas Gerais State, Southeast Brazil. This article was published in Journal of Paleontology in 2018. In this article, the species identified were Arbinia affinity, Arbinia ungulata, Arbinia symmetrica, Arbinia affinity, Arbinia salitrensis, Arbinia alta, and Arbinia affinity, Arbinia crepata. Brasilicypris ovum, Brasilicypris fulfuroi, Cypridia hystrix, Cypridia conjugata, Cypridia affinity, Cypridia infima, Cypridia affinity, Cypridia jequiensis, Neuquenocypris, Protoneuquenocypris antiqua. It is worth pointing out that later on, this species Cypridia conjugata was classified as Cypridia sp because this attribution to conjugata was not correct. Penthesilinola martinsi, Penthesilinola pintoi, and Alicinola longiformis. And finally, Chimidiacevia sanfranciscanensis. Later on, other sections were studied with the goal of recovering and identifying and describing ostracods by Leite 2022. The species were Arbinia affinity Arbinia ungulata, Arbinia alta, Arbinia affinity Arbinia crepata, Brasilicypris ovum, Brasilicypris affinity Brasilicypris morigerata, Brasilicypris fulfuroi. Damonella affinity Damonella ultima, Penthesilinola martinsi, Penthesilinola pintoi, Alicinola longiformis, Wolburgiopsis plastica, and Wolburgiopsis chinamortensis. During the bibliographic review, it was identified that although the Quiricó Formation was initially mentioned by Barbosa in 1965 from an outcrop on the banks of the Quiricó River in the Minas Gerais state, Brazil, that section was never formally described as a type section should be. The International Stratigraphic Guide states that a formal lithostratigraphic unit should have a stratotype section, and a type locality, with a clear and precise definition and characterization in order to define the stratigraphic unit. Also, it was never proposed a hypostratotype section for this formation, when, according to the International Stratigraphic Guide, might extend the knowledge on the lithostratigraphic unit and complement its definition. The article by Leite and do Carmo 2021 brought the official description of the Quiricó Formation together with a section proposed as hypostratotype section. The name of this article is Description of the Stratotype Section and Proposal of Hypostratotype Section of the Lower Cretaceous Quiricó Formation, São Francisco Basin, Brazil. This article was published in the Annals of the Brazilian Science Academy. Leite and do Carmo 2021 also presented the state-of-the-art on stratigraphy of the Quiricó Formation, providing the entire historical review on the study of this formation with all the fossiliferous record recovered, which include gymnospermy, angiospermy, polynomorphs of angiospermy, arthropoda, and vertebrates, and, as we know, ostracods. This is the lower portion of the stratotype section of the Quiricó Formation. We can see here the Quiricó Formation in lower contact with the Abaeté Formation, both from the Areado group, and the Areado Formation in lower contact with the Santa Fe group. Also, we can observe several structures as well as the occurrence of fossils. This is the upper portion of the stratotype section of the Quiricó Formation. We can see here the Quiricó Formation in upper contact with the Três Barras Formation. The Três Barras Formation, as we know, is also a formation from the Areado group. In this section, we can also observe several structures as well as the occurrence of fossils. This is the Teresa Farm section, which is the hypostratotype section of the Quiricó Formation proposed by Leite and do Carmo 2021. In here, we can see the Quiricó Formation in lower contact with the Abaeté Formation and in upper contact with the Três Barras Formation. We can also see the Abaeté Formation in lower contact with the Serra da Saudade Formation, which is from the Proterozoic era. In this section, we can also observe an abundant occurrence of different types of fossils. The biostratigraphic framework for the Quiricó Formation also approaches another important section studied by Leite 2022, the São Bento Farm. This is the São Bento Farm, where we can see the Quiricó Formation in lower contact with the Jequitaí Formation, which is a formation from the Proterozoic. These three sections, the stratotype section of the Quiricó Formation, the Teresa Farm, which is the hypostratotype section of the Quiricó Formation, and the São Bento Farm, were approached under the biostratigraphic perspective by Leite and collaborators 2024. In this manuscript entitled Biostratigraphy of Limnicostracoda crustacea from the Quiricó Formation, Lower Cretaceous of the São Francisco Basin, Minas Gerais State, Brazil, an approach on Paleozoogeographic evolution of Gondwana. This article was published in Cretaceous Research. This work is a biostratigraphic and paleozoogeographic study of Lower Cretaceous limnic ostracods from the Quiricó Formation, São Francisco Basin, southeastern Brazil, and is the first attempt to establish a biostratigraphic framework based on ostracods for this formation, since biostratigraphy is the main instrument for dating it. This study also contributes to determining the paleozoogeographic correlation between the São Francisco Basin and other basins during the Lower Cretaceous of Gondwana. 6 biostratigraphic units are currently described from the lower to the upper part of the Quiricó Formation. They are Zone Brasiliensis ovum, Superzone Penthesilina pintoi, and zones Chimeriacevia sanfranciscanensis, Cypridia hystrix, Alicinula longiformis, and Arbinia spp. The Brasiliensis ovum zone, lowest occurrence interval, encompasses the Berriasia. The Penthesilina pintoi superzone, range interval, encompasses the other 4 zones, and its chronostratigraphic attribution is defined by them from Berriasian to Aptian, possibly Albian. The Chimeriacevia sanfranciscanensis zone, lowest occurrence interval, encompasses also the Berriasia. The Cypridia hystrix zone, range interval, encompasses the Valanginian Hauterivian interval. The Alicinula longiformis zone, highest occurrence interval, encompasses the Berrimian. And finally, the Arbinia spp zone, assemblage interval, encompasses the Optian. The Brasiliensis ovum zone. The limits of the zone are defined by the lowest occurrences of Brasiliensis ovum and Chimeriacevia sanfranciscanensis. It only occurs in a hypostratotype section of the Teresa farm, and it is not included in the Penthesilina pintoi superzone. The attribution of this zone is to the Berriasian and to the Rio da Serra local stage in Brazil, and that is based on the occurrence of Brasiliensis ovum. This species occurs in the Berriasian of the Tucano Basin. Here we can see the Brasiliensis ovum zone. The Penthesilina pintoi superzone. This zone is defined from the stratotype section of the Quiricó Formation and corresponds to the first and last occurrences of Penthesilina pintoi. In the stratotype section of the Quiricó Formation, the upper portion of the sequence, marked by only one layer with the occurrence of Penthesilina pintoi and Brasiliensis ovum, does not correspond to the Arbinia spp zone. The attribution of the upper portion of the Penthesilina-Lapintoi superzone to the Aptian or post-Aptian is uncertain, and that is why the top of the superzone is positioned in the Aptian, possibly Albian. The attribution of the superzone to the Berriasian Aptian is based on the attribution of the zones within it. In here, we can see the Penthesilina-Lapintoi superzone in all the 3 studied sections and how it encompasses almost all of the fossiliferous interval in 3 sections. The Timiriaceae São Franciscanense zone. This zone is defined by the lowest occurrence of Timiriaceae São Franciscanensis and the lowest occurrence of Cypridia hystrix. It only occurs in the hypostratotype section of the Teresa farm. The attribution of this zone to the Berriasian and to the local stage Rio da Serra in Brazil is based on the lowest occurrence of Cypridia affinity Cypridia infima, which is within the zone. Cypridia infima is a species that occurs in the Berriasian of the Recôncavo Basin in Brazil. In here we can see in yellow the Timiriaceae São Franciscanensis zone. This zone is within the Penthesilina-Lapintoi superzone. The Cypridia hystrix zone. This zone is defined by the occurrence of Cypridia hystrix. It only occurs in a hypostratotype section of the Teresa farm. The attribution of this zone to the Valanginian-Rotarevian interval and to local stages Rio da Serra and Aratu in Brazil is based on the occurrence of Cypridia hystrix. This species occurs in the Recôncavo Basin and in these zones, attributed to the Rio da Serra local stage, Valanginian. In here we can see in pink the Cypridia hystrix zone. The Alicinula longiforme zone. This zone is defined by the highest occurrence of Cypridia hystrix and highest occurrence of Alicinula longiformis. It is the only zone that occurs in all 3 sections. The attribution of this zone to the Berrimian and to local stages Buracica and Jiquiá in Brazil is based on the occurrences of Wolburgiopsis chinamuertensis, Wolburgiopsis plastica, and Damonella affinity Damonella ultima, which are species restricted to this zone. In the São Bento farm section, Wolburgiopsis chinamuertensis and Wolburgiopsis plastica, typical of the Berrimian in Argentina, occur mainly in this zone, with only one simultaneous occurrence in one level within the Arbinia SPP zone. Damonella ultima occurs in the Petrobrazia diversicostata zone, attributed to the Berrimian. In here, in green, we can see the Alicinula longiformis zone in all 3 study sections. And finally, the Arbinia SPP zone. This zone is defined by the assemblage of Arbinia affinity Arbinia salitrensis, Arbinia affinity Arbinia ungulata, Arbinia alta, Arbinia affinity Arbinia crepata, and Arbinia symmetrica. It occurs in the stratotype section of the Chiricó Formation and in the São Bento farm section, because in the hypostratotype section of the Teresa farm, there are no occurrences of Arbinia species. The attribution of this zone to the Optian and to the Alagoas local stage in Brazil is based on the assemblage of species of Arbinia, especially Arbinia symmetrica, Arbinia ungulata, Arbinia alta, and Arbinia salitrensis, belong to a zone called Arbennia SPP 201 to 208, attributed to the Alagoas local stage in Brazil, that is dated as Upper Optian, Lower Albian. And here in orange, we can see the Arbennia SPP zone only in the stratotype section of the Quiricó Formation and in the upper portion of the São Bento Farm section. This is the uppermost zone in this biostratigraphic framework for the Quiricó Formation. So in here, we have the species distribution within their biostratigraphic units, the ages of those units, and the local stages in Brazil. This figure sums up the biostratigraphic framework with the species distribution for the Quiricó Formation. 7 geochronologic settings are recognizable: Berriasian, Halterivian, Valanginian, Barremian, Aptian, Albian, and Upper Cretaceous. 5 of the 20 species recovered, Pentazolinula pintoi, Alicinula longiformis, Chimidia saevia franciscanensis, Cypridia sp1, and Cypridia sp2, were described from the Quiricó Formation and are restricted to the Quiricó Formation, therefore the São Francisco Basin. 12 species were described from other basins from Brazil. They are Arbennia salitrensis, Arbennia angulata, Arbennia alta, Arbennia crepata, Arbennia symmetrica, Brasilicypris ovum, Brasilicypris fulfuroi, Pentazolinula martinsi, Damonella ultima, Cypridia infima, Cypridia hystrix, and Cypridia jaquiensis. 3 species, Wolburgiopsis plástica, Wolburgiopsis chinomuertensis, and Neuquenocypris, Protoneuquenocypris antiqua, were described in basins from Argentina. And outside of South America, Arbennia symmetrica also occurs in basins from Gabon, Congo, Angola, and Africa. In here, we have the paleogeographic context for the Berriasian Valanginian, where we can see Brasilicypris ovum, Cypridia hystrix, and Cypridia infima in the Recôncavo Basin and the Tucano and Jatobá basins. In here, we have the paleogeographic context for the Halterivian Barremian, where we can see Cypridia hystrix, Cypridia jaquiensis, Damonella ultima, Wolburgiopsis plástica, and Wolburgiopsis chinomuertensis in the Recôncavo Basin, the Campos Basin, Sergipe-Alagoas Basin, and in the La Amarga Formation in Argentina. In here, we have the paleogeography for the Optian Albian, where we have Arbennia angulata, Arbennia symmetrica, Arbennia salitrensis, Arbennia alta, Arbennia crepata, Brasilicypris ovum, Cypridia jaquiensis, Neuquenocypris Protoneuquenocypris antiqua, Damonella ultima, and Pentazolinula martinsi, and the Campos Basin, Recôncavo Basin, Tucano-Jatobá, Sergipe-Alagoas, Araripe, Potiguar, Grajaú, and also in Argentina, Golfo San Jorge and Austral basins, and in Africa. And finally, we have the Brasilicypris ovum, which occurs in the bibliography in the Upper Cretaceous in the Paraná Basin. The hypostratotype section of the Teresa Farm presents the most basal interval of the Quiricó Formation due to the exclusive occurrence of zones Brasilicypris ovum, Chimidia saevia franciscanensis, and Cypridia hystrix, attributed to the interval Berriasian to Halterivian. The Alicinula longiformis zone, attributed to the Barremian, occurs at the top of the Theresiform and at the lower portions of the stratotype section and of the São Bento form. And the stratotype section and the São Bento form sections presents the upper interval of the Chiricó Formation due to the occurrence of the Arbennia SPP zone attributed to the Option. The paleogeographic setting seems to indicate two major paleoecological contexts: a lower and older under wetter environmental conditions, and an upper and younger under arid environmental conditions. It is possible to interpret a major fluvial influence for the lower portion of the hypostratotype section of the Theresiform. The stratotype section presents a paleoenvironmental and sedimentary context indicating water depth, often restricted and more saline and arid environmental conditions. This interpretation is based on the abundant occurrence of desert roses, mud cracks, and evaporitic layers. The abundance of species of Arbennia in the stratotype section corroborates to the high salinity interpretation because the genus is typical of lakes with hypersalinity. For the Cretaceous paleogeographic context, the existence of interconnected intermittent drainages, at least since the late Barremian, is discussed based on the distribution of several taxa, such as pollen, microcrustaceans, and vertebrates, mainly fishes. It is discussed the hypothesis that the São Francisco drainage was already established during the late Barremian. Also, studies indicate that by late Jurassic, several lacustrine systems could compose the same pilohydrographic systems between several basins from central Gondwana. Precipitation data in paleogeographic maps for the Berriasian and the early Optian enable the inference of a linkage between the São Francisco Basin and other interior and marginal basins during the interval Berriasian-Optian. This is the map for the Berriasian, possibly Barremian, where we can see in here a wet area and in here a dry desert area. And the São Francisco Basin in red is within this wet area with high precipitation. Here we can see the early Optian, where the São Francisco Basin in red is just a little outside of this wet area, already within this dry and desert area. Stratigraphic data and ostracotaxonomy indicate that the Chiricó Formation was deposited in a lacustrine environment with a major fluvial influence during the deposition of the lower portion and arid conditions during the deposition of the upper portion of the Chiricó Formation. The biostratigraphic framework and the paleozoography of ostracodes enable the correlation with local stages Rio da Serra to Alagoas in Brazil, and the interpretation of an interval from Berriasian to Optian, possibly Albian. It is possible to infer that the São Francisco Basin was correlated with several other interior and marginal basins from central Gondwana, possibly through a Paleo-São Francisco drainage. With that, I would like to thank CNPq for my doctorate scholarship, to the CAPES, both in Brazil, to the FAP-DF, also an institution from Brazil, to the CAPES IODP program, to the University of Brasília, where I conducted all of my research, to my dear advisor, Professor Dermoval, and to my colleagues and peers. Thank you so much for your attention.